The California sun beat down on the tarmac as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the unmarked sedan at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. The salty Pacific breeze hit her face, carrying with it the distant sound of surf and the sharp cadence of drill instructors barking orders. She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the car door, staring at the imposing gates of the compound that housed some of the most elite warriors in the world. This was it, no turning back now. Sarah reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a small plastic bag containing her rank insignia, the gold oak leaves that identified her as a lieutenant commander. She'd earned those leaves through blood, sweat, and 3 combat deployments in the Middle East. Every time she looked at them, she remembered the helicopter missions, the lives saved, the friends lost. But today, they had to disappear. With practiced efficiency, she removed every trace of rank from her fatigues. The Velcro strips came off easily, leaving behind faded rectangles where they'd been attached. She stuffed the insignia deep into her bag, buried beneath civilian clothes and toiletries. For the next several weeks, she wouldn't be Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. She'd just be Mitchell, nameless, rankless, and seemingly powerless. "You ready for this, Sarah?" she whispered to herself, checking her reflection in the car window. A 32-year-old woman with sharp green eyes and dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun stared back at her. She looked younger than her years, something that had always worked against her in the military. People saw her face and assumed inexperience. Perfect for this mission. She grabbed her duffel and headed toward the security checkpoint. The Marine guard at the gate barely looked at her ID card before waving her through. No salute, no recognition of rank, because there was no rank to recognize, just another body entering the compound. The base was exactly as she'd imagined. All business, all testosterone, all swagger. SEALs in various states of training moved with that distinctive confidence that came from knowing you were part of an exclusive brotherhood. Some jogged past in perfect formation, their cadence echoing off the buildings. Others worked out in an open-air gym, their muscles gleaming with sweat as they attacked pull-up bars and rope climbs with savage intensity. Sarah made her way toward the administrative building, following the directions Admiral Richard Bosworth had given her during their classified briefing 2 weeks ago. The Admiral's words still rang in her ears. "You'll be observed, tested, doubted, and probably harassed. Your job is to evaluate whether these men can work with female operators. But more importantly, Commander, you're evaluating whether they deserve to." The weight of that mission settled on her shoulders like her old flight helmet, heavy but familiar. "Yo, check it out," a voice called from her left. Sarah didn't break stride, but her peripheral vision caught the group of SEALs outside the gym. 5 of them, all built like comic book heroes, all staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. "Is that the girl?" another voice asked, not bothering to lower his volume. "Has to be. Admiral said she was coming today." A third voice, deeper and dripping with sarcasm. "Great. Another diversity experiment. How long you think she lasts?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but her face remained neutral. She'd expected this. Hell, she'd experienced worse during her flight training days when female pilots were still a rarity. But expecting it and experiencing it were 2 different things. The casual dismissal, the assumption of failure before she'd even done anything, it ignited a familiar fire in her belly. Good, she thought, let them underestimate me. She reached the administrative building and pushed through the doors into the air-conditioned interior. A young petty officer sat behind a desk, typing on a computer. He looked up, did a double-take, and quickly composed himself. "Can I help you?" "Mitchell, I'm here for check-in," Sarah said simply. The petty officer scrolled through his computer screen. "Right, Mitchell, temporary assignment, special evaluation." He printed out a badge and handed it to her. "Barracks assignment is Building 7, Room 14. You'll be briefed tomorrow at 600. "Understood." As Sarah turned to leave, the petty officer called after her. "Hey, Fair warning, the guys can be intense. Don't take it personally. Sarah gave him a slight smile. I never do. The walk to the barracks took her past the infamous grinder, the asphalt courtyard where SEAL candidates were broken down and rebuilt. The brass bell mounted on a post caught her eye. How many people had rung that bell, signaling their surrender, their decision that the pain wasn't worth it? Not me, Sarah thought, no matter what. Well, well, well. The voice came from directly ahead. Sarah looked up to find a wall of muscle blocking her path. The man had to be 6'3", with arms like tree trunks and a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. His tan uniform identified him as a chief petty officer, and his name tape read, Hendricks. Chief Jake Hendricks. Sarah had read his file. 15 years in the teams, multiple deployments, expert in close-quarters combat and advanced weapons training. By all accounts, he was a superb operator. He was also, according to several reports, aggressively opposed to women in combat roles. You must be our special guest, Hendricks said, crossing his arms. 4 other SEALs flanked him, creating an intimidating semicircle. Let me guess, you think you can be a SEAL? Sarah met his gaze steadily. I think I'm here to do a job, Chief. A job, he repeated mockingly. Honey, do you have any idea what we do here? This isn't some corporate office where you can file complaints to HR when things get tough. This is warfare. Life and death. My brothers need to trust that everyone on their team can pull their weight. I understand that completely, Sarah said calmly. One of the other SEALs snorted. She understands. Did you hear that, Chief? She understands. Hendricks stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over her. Here's what you don't understand. Every time the Navy brings in someone like you, it wastes our time. We have to babysit, adjust our training, watch what we say. And for what? So some politician can claim progress. So the Navy can check a diversity box. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides, but her voice remained level. With all due respect, Chief, you don't know anything about me or why I'm here. I know enough, Hendricks shot back. I know you'll last maybe a week before you're crying and ringing that bell. They always do. The other SEALs laughed, and Sarah felt the familiar sensation of being judged, dismissed, and underestimated all at once. Part of her, the part that had commanded helicopter crews and made life-or-death decisions under fire, wanted to explode, wanted to tell this arrogant chief exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. But that wasn't the mission. Instead, she adjusted her duffel bag and stepped around Hendricks. Guess we'll see, Chief. As she walked away, she heard one of the SEALs say, I give her 3 days max. Another replied, generous. I say she's gone by tomorrow night. Sarah kept walking, her spine straight, her head high. She reached Building 7 and found Room 14, a sparse space with a single bed, a locker, and a small desk. She dropped her duffel on the bed and sat down, letting out a long breath. Through the window, she could see the obstacle course where SEALs were training. They moved like predators, fast, efficient, deadly. These were warriors who'd earned their tridents through unimaginable hardship. Sarah respected that, even if they didn't respect her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Admiral Bosworth, first day, how's it going? Sarah typed back, as expected, sir. They think I'm here to become a SEAL. Good, keep your cover. Observe everything. Yes, sir. She set the phone aside and opened her duffel, pulling out a worn photograph. It showed a younger Sarah in a flight suit, standing beside a Navy helicopter with her father, Captain David Mitchell, a decorated FA-18 pilot who died in a training accident when she was 23. He'd taught her that respect was earned through action, not demanded through rank. Watch me, Dad, she whispered to the photo. I'm going to change things. Outside, the sun began to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of SEALs running in formation, their voices united in a cadence that spoke of brotherhood and strength. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Tomorrow, Sarah would step into their world and prove that courage, skill, and determination had nothing to do with gender. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of doubt, one moment of wondering if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. Then she stood up, squared her shoulders, and began unpacking. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell wasn't here to quit. She was here to win. The alarm shattered the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30. Sarah was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed in full PT gear, lacing her boots with methodical precision. She'd learned long ago that in the military, being on time meant being early, and being early meant being ready. Through the thin walls, she could hear other personnel stirring, the grumbling complaints of men forced from sleep, the shuffle of boots on linoleum. Sarah splashed cold water on her face, pulled her hair back into a tight bun, and checked her reflection one final time. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She'd barely slept, running through mental scenarios of what today might bring. The briefing room was packed when she arrived at 5:45. Roughly 40 SEALs filled the space, their conversations dying as she entered. Sarah felt the weight of every stare but kept her expression neutral, finding a seat in the back row. Chief Hendricks stood at the front, arms crossed, a clipboard in one massive hand. When he spotted Sarah, his lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Attention!" barked a senior officer as he entered. Everyone snapped to their feet. Lieutenant Commander Frank Morrison, the training officer, surveyed the room with the weathered eyes of a man who'd seen everything. "Today's exercise is simple," he announced. 20-mile ruck march through the Mojave. Full combat load, 75 pounds minimum. Temperature forecast is 104 degrees. You'll carry water but ration it carefully. Medical evac is available, but if you call for it, you fail. Sarah's stomach tightened. She'd done ruck marches before, but never in this heat, never with this weight, and never surrounded by men actively hopping. She'd fail. "Chief Hendricks will lead the formation," Morrison continued. "Minimum acceptable time is 4 hours. Anything over 5 hours is a failure. Questions?" Silence. "Good. Trucks leave in 15 minutes. Gear up." The SEALs moved like a well-oiled machine, heading to the equipment area where rucksacks were already prepared and waiting. Sarah grabbed hers and immediately felt the weight, easily 75 pounds, maybe more. She hoisted it onto her shoulders, adjusting the straps and hip belt with practiced efficiency. "Need help with that, sweetheart?" one of the SEALs called out, triggering a wave of laughter. Sarah ignored him, running through her mental checklist. Water, check. First aid kit, check. Extra socks, check. She'd learned in flight school that preparation was everything. The people who failed were usually the ones who cut corners. The truck ride to the starting point took 40 minutes, bouncing over rough desert roads as the sun began its merciless ascent over the horizon. Sarah sat in silence, surrounded by SEALs who joked and talked trash, their confidence palpable. These men knew they could do this. They'd done it dozens of times before. Petty Officer Marcus Webb sat across from her, a lean African-American SEAL with intelligent eyes and a more reserved demeanor than his teammates. He'd been watching her since she arrived, but unlike the others, his expression showed curiosity rather than contempt. "You ever done a desert march before?" he asked quietly. Sarah met his gaze. "A few times." "Not like this, though." "No," she admitted, "not like this." Webb nodded slowly. "Pace yourself. The heat is the real enemy, not the distance. And whatever you do, don't let pride keep you from taking care of yourself." Before Sarah could respond, the truck lurched to a stop. "Everybody out," Hendricks bellowed. "Form up." The Mojave stretched before them like an alien landscape, endless sand, scattered rock formations, and heat waves already shimmering off the ground even though it was barely 700. Sarah shouldered her ruck, feeling the weight settle across her back and hips. 75 pounds felt like 100 in this heat. Hendricks positioned himself at the front of the formation, deliberately placing Sarah in the second row, right where he could watch her. "Listen up," he shouted. "This march separates the operators from the wannabes. If you can't hack it, drop out now and save us all some time." His eyes found Sarah's. The message was clear: this is your chance to quit. Sarah stared back, unflinching. "Move out," Hendricks commanded. The formation surged forward, boots crunching on sand and gravel. The pace was punishing from the start. Hendricks was clearly trying to break people early. Sarah focused on her breathing, on the rhythm of her steps, on keeping her mind separate from her body's complaints. Mile 1, manageable. Her muscles warmed up, finding their groove. Mile 3, the sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Sweat poured down Sarah's face, stinging her eyes. She rationed her water carefully, just small sips to wet her mouth. Mile 5, the weight of the ruck began to dig into her shoulders, creating pressure points that would soon become raw spots. Several seals had pulled ahead, their longer strides eating up ground. Sarah maintained her pace, steady and sustainable. Hendricks kept glancing back at her, clearly expecting her to fall behind. Instead, she was keeping up with the main formation, her face set in grim determination. Mile 7, 2 candidates dropped out, their faces pale, their movements unsteady. Heat exhaustion was setting in. The medic truck rolled up, loaded them inside, and drove off. The formation continued without pause. Mile 10, halfway point. Sarah's lungs burned with each breath of superheated air. Her shoulders screamed in protest. Blisters were forming on her heels despite the extra socks. But she'd been in pain before, during survival training, during her deployments when she'd flown 20-hour missions in body armor. Pain was temporary. Failure was permanent. She started passing SEALs who'd gone out too fast and were now paying the price. One by one, she moved up through the formation, her pace never wavering. Mile 12, Hendricks noticed. His jaw clenched as Sarah pulled even with a group of experienced operators. "Mitchell," he barked, "you good?" "Yes, Chief," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her burning throat. He grunted, clearly annoyed that she wasn't struggling more. Mile 15. Only 8 people remained ahead of Sarah now. The leaders were all experienced SEALs, men who'd done this march countless times. And then there was her, the woman they'd expected to quit on day 1. Her body was in full rebellion mode. Every muscle ached. The rucksack felt like it had doubled in weight. But Sarah had learned to compartmentalize pain, to put it in a box and deal with it later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the next step, and then the next one after that. Mile 18. She passed 2 more SEALs, their faces masks of exhaustion and disbelief as this recruit they'd mocked surged past them. Mile 19. 3 people ahead of her now. Hendricks was one of them, his powerful frame churning forward with mechanical efficiency. But even he was suffering. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the slight hitch in his stride. The final mile stretched before them like an eternity. Sarah's vision tunneled, her entire world reduced to the boots of the man in front of her and the burning need to keep moving. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her lungs felt like they were filled with fire. But she kept going. The finish line appeared in the distance, a simple marker and a water station. The SEAL in second place crossed at 3:47. The leader hit it at 3:45. Sarah crossed at 3:51, third overall. She dropped her ruck and stumbled toward the water station, her legs nearly buckling. As she gulped down cool water, she heard Hendricks cross behind her at 3:54. The silence was deafening. Hendricks stormed toward her, his face crimson with heat and something else, humiliation. "You got lighter gear," he accused loudly. "There's no damn way." Sarah turned slowly, water dripping from her chin. "Check it yourself, Chief," she said calmly, gesturing to her discarded ruck. Every eye was on them now. Hendricks grabbed her rucksack and started pulling out items, weighing them in his hands. Standard issue canteens, regulation MREs, proper weight distribution. He checked the ruck itself, 78 pounds. Lieutenant Commander Morrison appeared, having watched the entire scene from the medical vehicle. Problem, Chief. Hendricks's jaw worked silently. Finally, he dropped the ruck. No problem, sir. Good, because that was one hell of a performance from Mitchell here. Third overall, first time in the Mojave. Impressive. Sarah said nothing, just nodded respectfully at the officer. From a ridge about 200 yards away, Admiral Richard Bosworth lowered his binoculars. A slight smile crossed his weathered face. His aide stood beside him, also watching. She's exceeding expectations, sir, the aide observed. She always does, Bosworth replied. That's why I chose her. The question isn't whether Mitchell can perform, it's whether these SEALs can set aside their prejudices long enough to recognize talent when they see it. Back at the finish line, Webb approached Sarah as she sat in the shade of the medical truck, changing into dry socks. That was impressive, he said quietly. Thanks, Sarah replied, examining a nasty blister on her heel. Where'd you train? Because that wasn't beginner's luck. Sarah looked up at him, considering her response. Here and there, petty officer, here and there. Webb studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Something tells me there's a lot more to you than meets the eye, Mitchell. As he walked away, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The real test was just beginning. The pool facility at Naval Special Warfare Command was Olympic-sized, but significantly deeper, 40 feet at its deepest point, designed to simulate combat diving conditions. Sarah arrived at 5:30 for the scheduled underwater navigation exercise, her body still sore from yesterday's desert march. The other SEALs were already there, checking their gear with the methodical precision of men who understood that underwater, mistakes were fatal. Sarah moved to her assigned locker and began pulling out her diving equipment. The dry suit, fins, weight belt, mask, everything appeared standard issue. She'd been diving since she was 16, had logged over 200 dives during her Navy career, including several in combat zones where one mistake could mean death or capture. But something felt wrong. She picked up her regulator, the device that controlled her air supply, and examined it carefully. To the untrained eye, it looked perfect, but Sarah's trained eye caught the subtle difference. The pressure valve was slightly loose, almost imperceptible unless you knew exactly what to look for. Her jaw clenched. This wasn't an accident. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her equipment. A loose pressure valve would cause air to leak slowly at first, then more rapidly as depth increased. In shallow water, it might just mean a shortened dive. At 40 feet, it could mean panic, rapid ascent, and potentially life-threatening injuries. Sarah glanced around the pool deck. Hendricks was across the facility, loudly instructing a group of candidates. Several other SEALs were nearby, but none were watching her. Whoever had tampered with her gear had been careful, subtle. She should report it. This was beyond hazing, this was dangerous. But reporting it would accomplish nothing except proving she was a liability, someone who needed protection. It would validate every doubt these men had about women in combat roles. Instead, Sarah quietly retrieved a tool kit from her bag and tightened the valve, testing it multiple times until she was satisfied. The repair took less than 3 minutes. She finished assembling her gear and joined the formation as if nothing had happened. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stood on the pool deck with a clipboard. Today's exercise tests your underwater navigation and emergency procedures. You'll dive in pairs to 40 feet, navigate a course using only compass and timing, then perform a simulated emergency ascent with your partner. Any questions? A young SEAL raised his hand. Sir, what about Mitchell? She diving solo. Negative, Mitchell, you're paired with Petty Officer Davis. A stocky SEAL with a shaved head and a suspicious expression stepped forward. Petty Officer Jake Davis, not to be confused with Chief Hendricks, but cut from the same cloth. Sarah had seen his type before. The guy who followed the Alpha, who needed to prove his toughness by targeting anyone perceived as weak. "Great," Davis muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Babysitting duty." Sarah ignored the comment and checked her gear one final time. The regulator was secure now, but she'd remain vigilant. Underwater was no place for surprises. "Divers enter the water," Morrison commanded. Sarah pulled on her mask and fins, then slipped into the pool. The water was surprisingly cold, kept at 65 degrees to simulate ocean conditions. She descended slowly, equalizing pressure in her ears, watching her gauges carefully. At 40 feet, the pool floor spread out beneath her like an alien landscape. White lines marked the navigation course, and various obstacles created a maze-like environment. Davis appeared beside her, giving the OK signal with obvious reluctance. They began navigating the course together, following compass headings and timing their kicks. Sarah moved with the fluid grace that came from hundreds of hours underwater, her breathing controlled and efficient. Davis, despite his attitude, was clearly a competent diver. That's when Sarah saw him. About 30 feet away, another diver was in trouble. His movements were jerky, panicked, the universal sign of an underwater emergency. Air bubbles streamed from his regulator in an uncontrolled flow. Equipment malfunction, Sarah realized instantly. His regulator had failed. The diver's partner was nowhere in sight, probably ahead on the course and unaware of the problem. Sarah made a split-second decision. She kicked hard toward the struggling diver, her training taking over completely. Davis noticed her sudden departure and followed, confused. The panicking SEAL saw Sarah approaching and reached for her desperately. A dangerous moment, because drowning people could pull down their rescuers. But Sarah knew the protocols. She grabbed his BCD buoyancy control device, firmly, establishing control, then offered her alternate regulator, the backup air source every diver carried. His eyes were wide with fear behind his mask, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Sarah locked eyes with him, her expression calm and commanding, silently telling him, "I've got you. Breathe." He took the regulator, and she felt his body relax slightly as air filled his lungs. She gave him the OK signal. He returned it shakily. Now came the tricky part. Controlled ascent from 40 feet with a distressed diver. Ascending too quickly could cause decompression sickness, the bends, or arterial gas embolism. But staying down wasn't an option with his equipment failing. Sarah inflated her BCD slightly, maintaining neutral buoyancy, and began a slow ascent, keeping one hand on the distressed diver's vest, the other monitoring her depth gauge. She ascended at the perfect rate, 30 feet per minute, stopping at 15 feet for a safety stop despite the emergency. Davis stayed close, ready to assist but clearly impressed by Sarah's textbook execution. They broke the surface together. Sarah immediately signaled for the safety team while keeping the distressed diver's head above water. "I got you," she said calmly. "You're okay, just breathe." The safety team arrived within seconds, helping the shaken SEAL to the pool edge. Medical personnel were already waiting, checking his vitals and oxygen levels. On the deck, dripping wet, the rescued SEAL pulled off his mask. Sarah recognized him, Petty Officer Second Class Miguel Ramirez, one of the younger team members who'd been relatively neutral toward her. "You," Ramirez gasped, still catching his breath. "You saved my life. That regulator just failed completely, if you hadn't been there." He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. Sarah nodded. "Your partner should have stayed closer. Always keep visual contact underwater." Morrison approached, his expression serious. "What happened down there?" "Equipment failure, sir," Sarah reported crisply. Petty Officer Ramirez's primary regulator malfunctioned. I provided emergency air and conducted a controlled ascent. Morrison examined Ramirez's faulty regulator, his frown deepening. This equipment was inspected yesterday. Someone's getting written up for this. He looked at Sarah with newfound respect. Good work, Mitchell. That was textbook emergency response. Where'd you learn to dive like that? Sarah hesitated. I've been diving for a while, sir. Clearly, Morrison made notes on his clipboard. Ramirez, get checked out by medical. Mitchell, Davis, return to the course and complete your navigation. As Sarah prepared to descend again, she felt eyes on her. Looking up, she saw at least a dozen SEALs watching from the observation area. The mockery in their expressions had been replaced by something else, curiosity, maybe even grudging respect. But Hendricks stood apart from the group, his arms crossed, his expression dark. He didn't look impressed, he looked angry. Later that evening, Petty Officer Marcus Webb sat in the base library, ostensibly studying dive manuals but actually running searches on his laptop. Something about Mitchell didn't add up. Her diving skills were too advanced, her tactical thinking too refined, her composure under pressure too practiced. She wasn't just some hopeful candidate, she was something else entirely. Webb pulled up the Navy personnel database and typed in S. Mitchell. Dozens of results appeared. He filtered by active duty, current assignment to Coronado. One result popped up: Mitchell, S. Lieutenant Commander, Naval Intelligence. But when he clicked on the file, he got an access denied message. His security clearance, secret level, standard for most SEALs, wasn't high enough. What the hell, Webb muttered. He tried different approaches, searching for deployment records, training history, anything that would give him more information. Most of the file was redacted, marked with classifications well above his clearance level. He did find fragments: multiple overseas deployments, flight qualification, advanced tactical training, but the details were locked behind security walls he couldn't breach. Webb sat back, thinking. A lieutenant commander outranked most people on this base, including Hendricks. She'd have years of military experience, probably combat experience given those deployment records. And she was Navy intelligence, which meant she was smart, trained in observation and analysis. So why was she here, pretending to be a candidate, taking abuse from people who should be saluting her? Someone's running an operation, Webb said quietly to himself. But what operation? He glanced around the empty library, then pulled out his phone and took a discreet photo of the limited information he could access. Whatever was going on, Webb had a feeling it was about to get very interesting. Across the base in her sparse quarters, Sarah examined the repaired regulator under her desk lamp. The tampering had been subtle but unmistakable. Someone wanted her to fail, or worse. She pulled out her encrypted phone and sent a brief message to Admiral Bosworth. Equipment sabotage today. Continuing mission as planned. The response came within minutes. Noted. Exercise extreme caution. Document everything. Sarah set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling. 3 more weeks of this. 3 more weeks of proving herself to men who didn't want to be convinced. But today she'd saved a life. And whether they admitted it or not, they'd seen what she was capable of. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, she allowed herself a small victory. Outside her window, Webb walked past, glancing up at her room briefly before continuing toward the barracks. Their eyes met for just a second through the glass. He knew something. Sarah could see it in his expression. The mission just got more complicated. The mess hall was packed during the lunch hour, a sea of tan and green uniforms filling every table. The noise level was considerable: conversations, laughter, the clatter of trays and silverware creating a constant din. Sarah sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating her lunch while reviewing notes on her tablet. She'd learned to appreciate solitude in crowds. 3 days had passed since the diving incident. 3 days during which the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Some SEALs now nodded to her in the corridors. A few had even offered brief words of acknowledgement. Ramirez had publicly thanked her again, telling anyone who would listen that Mitchell had saved his life with textbook precision. But not everyone was impressed. Chief Hendricks had become increasingly hostile, his comments sharper, his assignments more grueling. He seemed personally offended by Sarah's continued presence, as if her competence was a direct insult to his worldview. Sarah sensed him before she saw him, that prickling awareness that came from years of combat deployments, of learning to read a room for threats. The mess hall's noise level dropped noticeably. Hendricks stood at the entrance, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Sarah. He grabbed a tray but didn't get in the food line. Instead, he walked directly toward her table, his boots heavy on the linoleum floor. Conversations died in his wake, heads turned, everyone sensed what was coming. Hendricks stopped in front of Sarah's table and slammed his empty tray down with a sound like a gunshot. The remaining conversations in the mess hall ceased completely. 200 SEALs, support staff, and officers turned to watch. "I've had enough," Hendricks announced, his voice carrying across the silent room. "We need to address the elephant in the room." Sarah slowly set down her fork, her face carefully neutral. "Chief." "Don't chief me," Hendricks snapped. "I'm tired of this charade. I'm tired of pretending this is normal. I'm tired of wasting this team's time and resources on another diversity experiment that's going to fail." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but her voice remained calm. "I don't understand what you're referring to." "The hell you don't." Hendricks's face flushed red. "You come here with your mystery background, your convenient skills, acting like you belong in our world. But you don't belong here. You will never belong here." The room was so quiet Sarah could hear her own breathing. "These men," Hendricks gestured around the mess hall, "they earned their place through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. They didn't get here because some admiral thought it would look good for the Navy's public image. They got here because they're the best of the best." Sarah's hands clenched beneath the table, her knuckles white. Every fiber of her being screamed to stand up, to tell this arrogant chief exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished. 3 combat deployments, 43 combat missions, 2 air medals, a Bronze Star for valor. But she remained seated, silent. "You know what I think?" Hendricks leaned forward, his hands on the table. "I think you're wasting everyone's time. I think you know you can't hack it, but you're too stubborn to admit it. So here's what I'm proposing. Save us all the trouble. Walk over to that bell right now and ring out. End this experiment with whatever dignity you have left." The mess hall erupted in murmurs. Some SEALs looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in agreement. A few, including Webb, looked angry at Hendricks's display. Sarah's mind raced. She could end this right now. One sentence: "I'm Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell and I outrank you, Chief." The satisfaction would be immense. The look on Hendricks's face would be priceless. But then what? The mission would fail. These men would dismiss everything she'd accomplished, claiming she deceived them. The evaluation would be worthless. Nothing would change. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Respect earned through deception isn't real respect, Sarah. Make them see the truth through your actions, not your words." Sarah stood slowly, her 5'6" frame dwarfed by Hendricks's bulk. The room held its collective breath. "Chief Hendricks," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the silence, "I understand your concerns. I understand that my presence here challenges your beliefs about who belongs in special operations." Hendricks's eyes narrowed. "Damn right it does. But I'm not here because of some admiral's political agenda. I'm here because I have a job to do, and I'm not leaving until that job is finished." "A job?" Hendricks laughed harshly. "What job? Proving that women can pretend to be operators. That's not a job, that's a joke." Sarah's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the sheer effort of maintaining control. Every instinct honed through years of command, every ounce of pride in her accomplishments screamed at her to fight back. Instead, she picked up her tray. "I'm not ringing that bell, Chief. Not today, not ever." She walked past Hendricks toward the tray return, her spine straight, her head high. Behind her, she heard him call out, "You're just prolonging the inevitable, Mitchell." Sarah dumped her tray and kept walking, pushing through the mess hall doors into the bright California sunshine. Only when she was outside, alone behind the building, did she let her composure crack. Her hands shook violently. Tears of frustration burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd faced enemy fire, mechanical failures at 10,000 feet, the deaths of friends and colleagues, but somehow this felt harder. This personal, targeted humiliation cut deeper than physical danger ever had. "Breathe," she told herself, "just breathe." She pulled out her encrypted phone and sent a message to Admiral Bosworth. "Request immediate meeting. Private." The response came within seconds. "My office, 30 minutes." Admiral Richard Bosworth's office overlooked the Pacific, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a spectacular view of the ocean. Sarah sat ramrod straight in the chair across from his desk, her emotions carefully locked down again. Bosworth studied her with the sharp eyes of a man who'd commanded thousands of sailors. "I heard about the mess hall." "Yes, sir." Hendricks crossed a line. "Yes, sir." "You want to quit?" Sarah's eyes snapped to his. "No, sir. I want permission to complete the mission." Bosworth leaned back in his chair. "Commander, you've endured enough. You've gathered valuable data on how these teams react to female operators. Your evaluation has been thorough. We can end this now." "With all due respect, sir," Sarah's voice cracked slightly and she paused to steady it. "If we end it now, they win. Hendricks gets to believe he was right. Every SEAL who doubted me gets validation. Nothing changes. You've proven yourself 10 times over." "To you, sir, but not to them." Sarah leaned forward. "They need to see the complete picture. They need to understand that they've been working alongside a fully qualified officer this entire time, and their prejudices blinded them to that reality." Bosworth was quiet for a long moment. "What you're asking for, it's going to get harder, not easier. Hendricks isn't going to back down." "I know, sir. He might escalate. I'm prepared for that." The Admiral stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Your father would be proud of you, Commander. David Mitchell was one of the finest officers I ever served with. He believed in leading by example, in earning respect through action." Sarah's throat tightened at the mention of her father. Bosworth turned back to her. "How much longer do you need?" "1 week, sir. There's a major training exercise scheduled, a full mission simulation. If I can prove myself there in a realistic combat scenario, it will carry more weight than any administrative evaluation." 1 week, Bosworth agreed. "But Commander, the moment I think your safety is genuinely threatened, I'm pulling you out. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "And Sarah," the Admiral's expression softened slightly, "you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You've already accomplished more than most of these men ever will." Sarah stood, squaring her shoulders. "Thank you, sir, but I need to prove it to them. That's the whole point." As she left the Admiral's office, the sun was beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Sarah paused on the steps, looking out at the ocean where Navy ships moved silently across the horizon. 1 more week, 7 more days of being dismissed, doubted, and disrespected. But then the truth would come out, and everything would change. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mess hall took guts. Some of us are watching. Webb." She smiled slightly. Maybe not everyone was against her after all. The pre-dawn darkness was shattered by the blare of alarm klaxons throughout the base. Sarah jolted awake, her military instincts kicking in immediately. This wasn't a scheduled drill. The timing was wrong, the alarm pattern different. Her door burst open. A young petty officer stood in the threshold, breathing hard. All personnel to the briefing center, full combat gear. Move, move, move. Sarah was dressed and equipped in under 4 minutes, her muscle memory from countless real emergencies guiding her movements. She grabbed her tactical vest, weapon, and helmet, then sprinted toward the briefing center along with dozens of other SEALs rushing from their quarters. The briefing room was chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Admiral Bosworth stood at the front with Lieutenant Commander Morrison and several senior officers. Large screens displayed satellite imagery of what appeared to be an industrial complex. "Listen up," Bosworth's command voice cut through the noise. "This is a no-notice training exercise, but treat it as real-world. Intelligence indicates a high-value target is being held in a hostile facility. Your mission: extract the HVT and neutralize all hostile forces. Time is critical. Questions will be answered by your team leaders." Morrison stepped forward with a tablet. "I'm assigning teams now. This is randomized. You work with who you're assigned, no exceptions." Names and team assignments flashed on the screen. Sarah watched, expecting to be placed on a support role or excluded entirely. Team 3 later, Mitchell. The room went silent. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Team 3 members: Hendricks, Webb, Davis, Ramirez, and Thompson. Hendricks exploded from his seat. "Sir, with all due respect." "Did I stutter, Chief?" Morrison's voice was ice. "Mitchell is your team leader. You have a problem with that. You can sit this one out and explain to the Admiral why you refused a direct order." Hendricks's jaw worked silently, his face purple with rage, but he sat down. Sarah moved to the front where team leaders were gathering. Her mind was already shifting into command mode. She'd led tactical operations before, though none of these men knew that. 5 other teams were being briefed simultaneously, each with different approach vectors. Morrison handed her a tablet with mission specifics. "You've got 20 minutes to plan and brief your team. The facility is a mock-up of a terrorist compound, 3 buildings, multiple hostiles, unknown HVT location. Rules of engagement are standard. You'll be evaluated on speed, efficiency, and 0 simulated casualties. Questions?" "No, sir," Sarah said crisply, already studying the facility layout. She moved to a corner table where her assigned team reluctantly gathered. Hendricks stood with arms crossed, his posture screaming defiance. Webb looked curious. The others seemed uncertain. "Sit," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying an authority she'd kept hidden until now. Something in her tone made them obey, even Hendricks. Sarah spread the tablet imagery across the table. "Here's the situation. 3 buildings forming a U-shape around a central courtyard. Multiple entry points, but most are choke points where we'd be exposed. Standard approach would be breaching the front, which is exactly what they expect." "So what's your brilliant plan?" Hendricks asked sarcastically. Sarah ignored his tone and pointed to the satellite image. "Service tunnel system. Every industrial facility has them for maintenance and utilities. Look here." She zoomed in on a barely visible grate, ventilation access on the east side. "It's small, which is why it's probably not heavily guarded." Webb leaned forward, studying the image. "That tunnel's barely 2 feet in diameter." "Exactly. They won't expect it. Davis and Thompson, your smallest on the team, you go through the tunnel, emerge inside, and secure the HVT location. Webb, you and Ramirez breach from the east with suppressive fire to draw attention. Hendricks, you're with me on the north approach. We provide overwatch and cut off any escape routes." Hendricks shook his head. "That tunnel approach is suicide if they're waiting inside." "They won't be," Sarah interrupted. "Because while they're focused on Webb's team making noise at the east entrance, Davis and Thompson will already be inside extracting the target. It's a 3-pronged distraction and extraction." "And if you're wrong," Hendricks challenged. Sarah's eyes locked onto his. Then it's on me, but I'm not wrong. Trust the plan, Chief. Davis spoke up, surprising everyone. It could work, unconventional but solid tactical thinking. 15 minutes to execution. Morrison's voice boomed over the loudspeaker. Gear up, Sarah ordered. Check your ammunition. It's simulated rounds, but they still hurt. Comms check in 5 minutes. Any questions about your assignments? Silence. Even Hendricks had nothing to say. The mock-up facility loomed in the pre-dawn light, a sprawling complex of concrete buildings and chain-link fencing. Hostiles, base personnel playing enemy combatants, patrolled with realistic weapons loaded with paint rounds and laser tag sensors. Sarah's team moved into position, their movements silent and professional. Whatever personal feelings existed, these were trained operators who understood mission discipline. Team 3 in position, Sarah reported over the radio. All teams ready, Morrison responded from the command center. You have a go. Execute, execute, execute. Webb, Ramirez, execute east breach in 30 seconds, Sarah commanded, her voice calm and clear over the comms. Copy, Webb responded. Sarah and Hendricks positioned themselves on the north ridge, weapons ready. She could feel his resentment radiating like heat, but his movements were professional, his positioning perfect. Davis Thompson, you're clear for tunnel approach, go now. Through her scope, Sarah watched the 2 SEALs disappear into the ventilation grate. Seconds ticked by like hours. We're in, Davis whispered over the radio, moving toward target location. Webb, initiate breach, now. Explosions, simulated but realistic, erupted at the east entrance. Webb and Ramirez stormed through, their weapons firing controlled bursts. Exactly as planned, hostile forces rushed toward the commotion. Hostiles moving away from central building, Sarah reported. Davis, you should have clear path to HVT. Confirmed, we have visual on target, 3 hostiles in the room. Sarah's mind calculated angles, timing, risks. Stand by. Webb, increase suppressive fire in 3, 2, 1, execute. The noise level intensified. Every enemy in the compound was now focused on the east breach. Davis, extract now. Moving. Through her scope, Sarah saw Davis and Thompson emerge from the central building with the hostage, a mannequin in civilian clothes. But 5 hostiles appeared from an unexpected direction, cutting off their escape route. Contact left, Davis shouted. Sarah's training took over. Hendricks targets at 2 o'clock, 300 meters. Engage. Hendricks hesitated for a split second, taking orders from her clearly graded against every instinct. But then his professional training kicked in. He sighted, fired, and 3 hostiles were marked with paint rounds. Confirmed hits, the range safety officer announced over the radio. 2 more mine, Sarah said, squeezing her trigger twice. 2 more hostiles down. Path clear, extraction route open, Sarah commanded. All teams rally point Alpha move. The entire operation from breach to extraction took 7 minutes and 43 seconds. 0 simulated casualties. Mission success. The after-action debrief room buzzed with energy. Admiral Bosworth stood at the front, reviewing the mission footage on multiple screens. Team 3, he announced, completed the objective in 7 minutes, 43 seconds. Fastest time of all 6 teams. 0 casualties. Innovative approach utilizing an unconventional entry point that was not identified in the pre-mission briefing. He looked directly at Sarah. Mitchell, explain your tactical reasoning. Sarah stood. Sir, conventional breach points are conventional because they're obvious. In a real-world scenario, enemies fortify the obvious approaches. I looked for the approach they'd least expect, one that seemed too small, too difficult, too unconventional to be viable. Combined with a coordinated distraction, it gave us the element of surprise. Morrison nodded slowly. Textbook asymmetric tactical thinking. Where'd you learn that? Sarah's eyes flicked to Admiral Bosworth, who gave her the slightest nod. Experience, sir. Several SEALs were nodding now, murmuring approval. Even some who'd been hostile before couldn't argue with results. Hendricks sat in the back row, his arms still crossed, but his expression had changed. The anger was still there, but something else had joined it. Respect, grudging and unwilling, but undeniable. Webb caught Sarah's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. As the debrief concluded and teams dispersed, Hendricks approached Sarah. The room had mostly emptied, just a few stragglers remaining. That was, he struggled with the words, competent work. Sarah raised an eyebrow. High praise, Chief. Don't let it go to your head. But his tone lacked its usual venom. That tunnel approach, I thought it was crazy, but it worked. Sometimes crazy is what's needed. Hendricks studied her for a long moment. Who the hell are you really, Mitchell? Sarah smiled slightly. Someone who knows what they're doing, Chief. That's all you need to know right now. As she walked away, Sarah felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. She'd proven herself in combat conditions. Simulated, yes, but realistic enough to matter. 4 more days until the Admiral's announcement. 4 more days until everything changed. The morning after the successful mission simulation, Sarah found a protein bar on her desk in the equipment room. No note, no name, just a simple gesture that spoke volumes. By noon, someone had left a fresh set of tactical gloves in her locker, the expensive kind that most SEALs bought with their own money. The tide was shifting, quietly but unmistakably. Sarah was running maintenance on her weapon when Petty Officer Second Class Miguel Ramirez approached, his footsteps hesitant. The young SEAL who she'd saved during the diving exercise stood before her, his hands clasped nervously. Mitchell, you got a minute? Sarah looked up from cleaning her rifle. Sure, Ramirez, what's on your mind? He glanced around to make sure they were alone in the armory. I wanted to apologize for how I acted when you first arrived, the jokes, the assumptions. It wasn't right. He took a breath. My girlfriend just enlisted. She wants to go into aviation, maybe even try for combat roles someday. When I talk to her about what she'll face, I think about how we treated you, how I treated you. Sarah set down her cleaning rod, giving him her full attention. That takes courage to admit, Ramirez. Apology accepted. That mission yesterday, the way you commanded, the tactical thinking, it was impressive. Really impressive. He paused. You're not just some hopeful candidate, are you? Sarah smiled slightly. What makes you say that? Because I've been doing this for 4 years, and I've never seen a candidate with that level of tactical sophistication. The way you assessed that compound, identified vulnerabilities, coordinated 3 teams. He shook his head. That's senior operator-level thinking. Maybe I just got lucky. Right, Ramirez said skeptically, and maybe I'm secretly an astronaut. He extended his hand. Whatever your story is, Mitchell, you've earned my respect. Sarah shook his hand firmly. Thank you, that means a lot. As Ramirez left, Davis appeared in the doorway. The stocky SEAL who'd gone through the tunnel approached with less hesitation than Ramirez, his confidence more natural. Mitchell got a second. Seems to be my day for visitors, Sarah replied. Davis pulled up a chair, his expression serious. Look, I'm not big on speeches, so I'll keep this short. That tunnel approach yesterday, when you first suggested it, I thought you were nuts. But you knew exactly what you were doing. You calculated the risks, understood the enemy's likely positioning, and played it perfectly. Team effort, Davis. Bullshit, he said bluntly. That was leadership, good leadership. He leaned forward. I've worked under a lot of team leaders, and you're better than most. So whatever you're doing here, whatever this is really about, you've got my support. Sarah felt something unexpected, emotion threatening to crack her carefully maintained composure. These men didn't have to apologize. They didn't have to acknowledge her competence. But they were choosing to, and it mattered more than she'd expected. "Thank you, Davis, really." After he left, Sarah allowed herself a moment to process. 2 apologies in one morning. Maybe the mission was working after all. Across the base in the Intelligence Center, Petty Officer Marcus Webb sat at a computer terminal during his off hours, ostensibly reviewing mission reports, but actually conducting unauthorized research. The successful mission had only intensified his curiosity about Mitchell. Her tactical decisions weren't just competent, they were sophisticated, showing strategic thinking that came from advanced training and real-world experience. Webb pulled up the classified Navy personnel database again, this time using a backdoor access that his friend in naval intelligence owed him from their deployment together. It was technically against regulations, but Webb's instincts were screaming that something important was happening. He typed, "Mitchell's current assignment, Naval Special Warfare Command." The search returned a single result, but this time with more details than before. MITCHLL, Sarah J. Rank Lieutenant Commander 04. Branch, United States Navy. Current assignment, Naval Special Warfare Command TDY. Primary specialty, Naval Intelligence Officer. Secondary specialty, Naval Aviator Rotary Wing. Security clearance, Top Secret SCI. Webb's eyes widened. Lieutenant Commander. That meant she outranked Hendricks. Hell, she outranked most of the officers on this base except for the senior command staff. He scrolled down, finding fragments of her service record. Combat deployments, 3. Combat flight hours, 847. Decorations, Bronze Star Valor, 2x Air Medal, Navy Achievement Medal, Combat Action Ribbon. "Holy shit," Webb whispered. He clicked on the deployment history, but most of it was redacted, black bars covering dates, locations, and mission details. What he could see indicated deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, with classifications ranging from secret to top secret. One entry caught his eye. Operation redacted, role, mission commander result, redacted, Bronze Star awarded for heroic achievement in combat operations. This wasn't just a competent operator. This was a decorated combat veteran with command experience at levels that most SEALs never reached. Webb sat back, his mind racing. Why would a lieutenant commander with this background subject herself to the treatment she'd received? Why hide her rank and credentials? Then it clicked. She was evaluating them, testing how the teams would react to a female operator without the protection of rank or the authority of command. She was documenting their behavior, their prejudices, their capabilities to work with women in combat roles. Webb grabbed his phone and texted Mitchell, "Need to talk. Private, it's important." They met on the beach an hour after sunset, far from the base buildings where conversations might be overheard. The Pacific crashed against the shore, providing white noise that would mask their words. Webb didn't waste time. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Naval Intelligence, 3 combat deployments, Bronze Star for Valor, should I continue? Sarah's expression didn't change, but her eyes assessed him carefully. "That's an interesting story, Petty Officer." "It's not a story, ma'am. It's your service record." Webb pulled out his phone, showing her the database screenshots. "I probably broke 6 regulations accessing this, but I had to know." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, listening to the waves. Finally, she spoke. "What are you going to do with that information?" "Nothing," Webb said immediately. "Your secret's safe with me, but I need to understand why. Why put yourself through this?" Sarah turned to face the ocean, her profile illuminated by moonlight. For the first time since arriving at Coronado, her guard dropped slightly. "Because someone has to. The Navy is changing, Webb. Women are going to be in combat roles whether people like Hendricks accept it or not. But if we just mandate integration without addressing the underlying prejudices, people will die." "So this is an evaluation." "It's more than that. It's a test of whether elite operators can see past gender to recognize competence, whether they can work with someone based on their skills rather than their biology. She looked at him. Some have passed that test, others haven't. Webb nodded slowly. Hendricks doesn't know, does he? No one does except the Admiral and now you. He's been giving you orders. A chief petty officer has been ordering around a lieutenant commander. Webb couldn't help but smile. That's going to be one hell of a moment when he finds out. 4 more days, Sarah said quietly. 4 more days and the Admiral makes his announcement. Everyone will know. And then what? And then my report will influence the future of Special Operations integration. Women will start entering SEAL training officially. The military will change. Webb was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, ma'am, you've earned the respect of anyone worth respecting. The ones who still can't see it, that's their failure, not yours. Sarah felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Thank you, Webb, that means more than you know. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves. One question, Webb said. What did you do to earn that bronze star? Sarah smiled slightly. That's classified. Of course it is, Webb grinned, but I'm guessing it was something pretty badass. Let's just say it involved a helicopter, hostile territory, and a rescue mission that wasn't supposed to be possible. Webb laughed. Yeah, definitely badass. As they walked back toward the base, Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Having one person know the truth, one ally who understood the mission, it made the isolation more bearable. But back in the barracks, Hendricks sat in his room, staring at the mission footage from yesterday's exercise. He watched Mitchell command the team, her decisions precise and confident. He watched himself following her orders and the efficiency that resulted. His phone showed a text thread with several other chiefs, all complaining about the Mitchell situation. But Hendricks didn't respond. Something had shifted in him during that mission. Something that made him uncomfortable, that challenged beliefs he'd held for years. He'd been wrong before, rare, but it happened. The question was whether he could admit it. 4 more days until answers came. 4 more days until everything changed. The demolition training was supposed to be routine. A controlled explosion in an aging building scheduled for destruction. Standard practice for teaching SEALs about explosive ordnance and structural collapse patterns. Sarah watched from the observation area as the demo team set their charges, following protocols that had been executed hundreds of times without incident. But sometimes, routine becomes catastrophic in seconds. The explosion came at 14:34 hours, a thunderous boom that shook the ground beneath their feet. But instead of the building collapsing inward as planned, the eastern wall buckled outward, triggering a cascading structural failure. The entire 3-story structure came down in a cloud of concrete dust and twisted metal, sections falling in directions the engineers hadn't anticipated. Jesus Christ, someone shouted. Through the settling dust, Sarah's trained eyes spotted the problem immediately. The observation platform where 2 SEALs had been documenting the demolition was now buried under tons of rubble. They'd been positioned in what should have been the safe zone, but the unexpected collapse pattern had turned it into a death trap. We've got men down, a voice yelled over the radio. 2 personnel trapped under the eastern collapse, medical and rescue teams to the site. Sarah's heart hammered as she ran toward the collapse site with dozens of others. But as she arrived, chaos greeted her. Personnel were shouting conflicting orders, some trying to move rubble by hand, others calling for heavy equipment. No coordination, no command structure. Where's Commander Morrison? Someone demanded. Off base at headquarters, Lieutenant Vasquez too. Chief Hendricks should. He's inside the perimeter, trying to coordinate. Sarah pushed through the crowd and saw the situation clearly. Hendricks was indeed trying to organize the rescue, but the rubble pattern was complex, unstable. Without proper engineering assessment, They could trigger a secondary collapse and kill the trapped men. A young petty officer stumbled past, his face pale. "We can hear them. They're calling for help, but we can't get to them without." The structure groaned ominously. A piece of concrete the size of a car shifted, and everyone instinctively stepped back. "Nobody touch anything," a voice called out. "We need structural engineers." "They're 20 minutes out," someone responded. "We don't have 20 minutes. Sarah's mind shifted into command mode, the same mode that had taken over during combat missions when helicopter systems failed, when enemy fire erupted, when decisions measured in seconds determined who lived and who died. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Leadership isn't about rank. It's about stepping up when no one else will. She moved to the center of the collapse site, and her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Everyone listen up. Stop moving and listen to me right now." The authority in her tone, pure, undeniable command presence, made everyone freeze. Heads turned toward her. "This structure is unstable," Sarah announced, her voice carrying across the site. "Uncoordinated rescue attempts will cause secondary collapse and kill the trapped personnel and rescuers. We need systematic approach now." A senior chief she didn't recognize challenged her. "Who the hell put you in charge?" "I did," Sarah responded without hesitation. "Because right now, no one else is in charge and men are dying, so either follow my orders or get out of my way." Something in her eyes, the absolute certainty of someone who'd done this before, made the senior chief step back. Sarah pointed at Webb, who just arrived. "Webb, I need structural assessment. That main beam there," she indicated a massive support column, "is compromised but holding. We have maybe 15 minutes before it fails completely. Get me 3 experienced operators who know demo and structural dynamics." Webb didn't question, just moved. "On it." "You," Sarah pointed at Davis, "get heavy equipment positioned here and here, but engines off until I give the word. The vibration could trigger collapse." Davis nodded and ran. Hendricks emerged from the perimeter, dust-covered and frustrated. He saw Sarah directing personnel and his face flushed with anger. "Mitchell, what the hell do you think you're?" "Chief," Sarah's voice cracked like a whip, "2 men are trapped under approximately 4 tons of concrete. The primary support beam has a stress fracture that will fail catastrophically in less than 15 minutes. I need your expertise, not your ego. Are you going to help or not?" Hendricks stared at her, shocked by the transformation. This wasn't the quiet candidate who'd endured his abuse. This was someone else entirely, someone who commanded with absolute authority. The groaning of stressed metal made the decision for him. "What do you need?" "I need you to coordinate the heavy equipment operators. When I give the signal, they lift sections simultaneously to distribute load. Any mistake and this whole thing comes down on all of us." "Understood." Hendricks grabbed his radio and started coordinating. Webb returned with 3 SEALs. "These are our demo experts." Sarah quickly sketched a diagram in the dust. "The trapped men are here under this section. We can't lift from above, too much weight. But if we create a support structure here and here, then use precision charges to fracture this concrete section, we can create an extraction channel without triggering full collapse." One of the demo experts, a grizzled chief named Patterson, studied her diagram. "That's actually brilliant. Where'd you learn structural engineering?" "Later, Chief. Can you set those charges in 5 minutes?" "Yeah, but the precision required. If we're off by even a few ounces of explosive." "I know," Sarah said, "but it's the only option. That beam won't hold much longer." She turned to address everyone. "Here's how this works. Demo team sets precision charges. Heavy equipment positions support beams. Medical team stands ready at the extraction point. When the charges blow, we have approximately 90 seconds to extract both men before secondary collapse. Everyone needs to execute perfectly. One mistake, we all die. Questions?" A young SEAL raised his hand. How do you know this will work? Sarah met his eyes. Because I've done this before. The confidence in her voice wasn't bravado, it was certainty, and everyone felt it. Move, she commanded. The next 10 minutes were orchestrated chaos. Patterson's demo team worked with surgical precision, placing shaped charges at exact points Sarah specified. Hendricks coordinated equipment operators with grudging efficiency, following Sarah's instructions to the letter. Medical personnel positioned themselves with stretchers and emergency equipment. Sarah stayed at the center, monitoring every element, adjusting the plan as conditions changed. Through it all, she maintained constant radio communication with the trapped men, her voice calm and reassuring. "Hang on," she told them. "We're coming for you 2 more minutes." Mitchell, one of the trapped men, Petty Officer Carson, responded weakly, "I don't know who you are, but your voice. It's keeping me conscious." "Stay with me, Carson. That's an order." Patterson jogged over. "Charges set, ready on your command." Sarah took a breath, running through the sequence one final time in her head. Then she keyed her radio. "All teams stand by for extraction. Medical be ready to move fast. Equipment operators on my mark, you lift sections simultaneously, north side first, then south. Demo team charges blow in sequence, 1, 2, 3. Extraction team moves the instant we have the channel. Confirm readiness." One by one, team leaders confirmed. "Ready. Heavy equipment ready. Demo ready. Medical ready." Sarah looked at Hendricks. Their eyes met, and for the first time she saw something other than hostility. She saw respect and maybe a glimmer of understanding. "Chief, you ready?" "Ready," Hendricks said quietly. Sarah keyed the radio. "Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark." The shaped charges detonated with precision, fracturing concrete exactly as planned. Heavy equipment roared to life, lifting sections simultaneously. The extraction channel appeared, narrow, unstable, but open. "Go, go, go," Sarah commanded. The extraction team dove into the channel. 12 seconds later, they emerged with the first trapped seal. 20 seconds after that, the second man was pulled free. "Clear everyone back," Sarah ordered. The entire rescue team scrambled away as the structure gave its final groan. The compromised beam failed, and the remaining sections collapsed inward with a thunderous crash, sealing the extraction channel they'd used just moments before. Silence fell across the site, broken only by the sound of medical personnel working on the rescued men. Both were alive, injured but alive. Hendricks approached Sarah, his face unreadable. He was covered in dust, his hands cut and bleeding from moving rubble. "That was," he searched for words, "that was the most impressive command decision I've ever witnessed." Sarah nodded, adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Just doing what needed to be done, Chief." "No," Hendricks said firmly. "That wasn't just doing what needed to be done. That was expert-level crisis management, advanced structural knowledge, combat command experience." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Who the hell are you really?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Tomorrow, Chief, you'll know everything tomorrow." Admiral Bosworth appeared through the crowd, having rushed from headquarters when he heard about the emergency. His eyes swept the scene, the rescued men receiving medical care, the collapsed structure, the coordinated team standing down. He looked at Sarah and gave her the slightest nod. She just saved 2 lives and proven her worth beyond any doubt. The mission was complete. The assembly hall was packed to capacity at 800 the following morning. Every SEAL team, support personnel, and officer stationed at Naval Special Warfare Command had been summoned for a mandatory briefing. The unusual timing and lack of explanation had sparked rumors throughout the base. Sarah sat in the back row in her standard unmarked fatigues, watching the crowd file in. Webb caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Ramirez and Davis sat nearby, looking curious. Hendricks entered last, his expression troubled, clearly still processing yesterday's events. Admiral Richard Bosworth strode to the podium with Lieutenant Commander Morrison at his side. The room snapped to attention. "At ease, take your seats," Bosworth commanded. The assembled personnel sat, the room buzzing with whispered speculation. "Gentlemen," the Admiral began, his voice carrying easily across the hall, "over the past 3 weeks, this command has been participating in a classified evaluation, an assessment of our capabilities, our professionalism, and our readiness to evolve with the changing face of warfare." The whispers intensified. "This evaluation was conducted by someone who has been living among you, training alongside you, and observing every aspect of how this command operates." Bosworth paused for effect. "It's time you knew the truth about who she really is." He gestured toward the side entrance. "Would you join me, Commander?" Sarah stood and walked to the front of the hall. The room erupted in confused murmurs as SEALs craned their necks to watch her approach the stage. But when she reached the podium, Morrison stepped forward holding a uniform jacket. Not the unmarked fatigues she'd worn for weeks. This was a full-dress blue uniform, complete with ribbons and insignia. Sarah removed her plain jacket and donned the dress uniform as the room watched in stunned silence. The transformation was immediate and striking. Gold oak leaves gleamed on her collar, the insignia of a lieutenant commander. Her chest displayed rows of ribbons, Bronze Star with Valor device, 2 air medals, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, Combat Action Ribbon, and more. The silence in the room was absolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Bosworth announced, "meet Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jane Mitchell, United States Navy, Naval Intelligence Officer and former helicopter pilot with 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, 847 combat flight hours, decorated for valor in combat operations." You could have heard a pin drop. Hendricks sat frozen, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Around him, SEALs whispered frantically to each other, trying to process what they were seeing. "Commander Mitchell," Bosworth continued, "has spent the past 3 weeks embedded in your teams under my direct orders. She concealed her rank, her credentials, and her extensive combat experience to evaluate one critical question: can Naval Special Warfare Command work effectively with female operators? Sarah stepped to the microphone, her posture commanding, her voice clear and strong. No longer the quiet candidate enduring abuse, but a senior officer addressing her subordinates. For 3 weeks, she began, I've watched how this command operates. I've trained alongside some of the finest warriors in the world. I've been mocked, dismissed, sabotaged, and told I don't belong. Her eyes swept the room. But I've also been saved by your professionalism when it mattered most. I've seen some of you put aside prejudice to recognize competence. I've witnessed true brotherhood and warrior spirit. She paused, letting her words sink in. My father was Captain David Mitchell. Some of you may remember him. He was an FA-18 pilot who died in a training accident 15 years ago. Before he died, he told me something I've never forgotten. Respect isn't given because of what you are. It's earned because of what you do. Several SEALs nodded, recognizing the truth in those words. I didn't come here asking for special treatment or demanding respect because of my rank, Sarah continued. I came here to prove that women can perform at this level when given the opportunity. Not all women, just like not all men can be SEALs. But the qualified ones, the dedicated ones, the ones willing to earn it, they deserve that chance. She looked directly at Hendricks. Chief Hendricks, would you join me up here, please? Hendricks stood slowly, his face pale. He walked to the front like a man approaching his execution. When he reached the stage, he stood at attention, unable to meet her eyes. Chief, Sarah said quietly, but her voice carried through the microphone. You've been ordering around a lieutenant commander for 3 weeks. You've questioned my presence, challenged my abilities, and made it clear you believed I had no place here. Hendrix's jaw clenched. Yes, ma'am, I did. And yesterday, during the rescue operation, what did you do? Hendrix finally met her eyes. I followed your orders, ma'am, without question. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Because you knew what you were doing. Because you saved those men with expert command decisions I couldn't have made. Because, he took a breath, because you proved you belong here more than most of us ever will. The room was silent, hanging on every word. Commander Mitchell, Hendrix continued, his voice stronger now, I owe you an apology, a public one. I judged you based on gender instead of capability. I assumed you'd fail instead of giving you a chance to succeed. I was wrong, completely wrong, and I'm sorry. Sarah studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. Apology accepted, Chief. And for what it's worth, your expertise during that rescue was invaluable. You're an outstanding operator. Hendrix shook her hand, something like relief crossing his face. Admiral Bosworth stepped forward again. Commander Mitchell's report will be submitted to Naval Special Warfare Command and the Secretary of the Navy. Her recommendations will shape the future integration of female operators into Special Operations Forces. Based on her findings, qualified female candidates will begin entering the SEAL training pipeline within 6 months. He paused, surveying the room. The military is changing, whether you're comfortable with that change or not. Women will serve in combat roles alongside you. The question isn't whether this will happen. It's whether you'll be professional enough to judge people on their merit rather than their gender. Sarah took the microphone one final time. I know some of you still have doubts. That's okay. But I ask you to remember this. I earned your respect not by demanding it, not by hiding behind rank, but by proving myself through action. That's all any operator wants, to be judged by what they can do, not what they look like. She gestured to the ribbons on her chest. This Bronze Star, I got it leading a rescue mission in hostile territory when my helicopter was shot down. We saved 17 lives that day. My co-pilot and crew chief, both women, received silver stars for their actions. Courage isn't gender-specific. Neither is competence. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone. A few remained seated, arms crossed. But the majority stood, clapping, some even cheering. Webb stood and started a slow clap that built into a standing ovation. Ramirez and Davis joined immediately. One by one, even the skeptics rose to their feet. Hendrix was the last to stand, but when he did, he clapped louder than anyone. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck, overlooking the infamous SEAL training grinder. Below, a new class of candidates was going through Hell Week, the brutal 5.5-day ordeal that separated those who would continue from those who would ring the bell. Among the candidates were 2 women, covered in sand and salt water, pushing through log drills alongside their male counterparts. They were struggling, everyone struggled during Hell Week, but they weren't quitting. Think they'll make it? Webb's voice came from beside her. He'd been assigned as one of the training cadre for this cycle. Maybe, maybe not, Sarah replied. That's not the point. The point is they have the chance to try. Footsteps approached from behind. Hendrix joined them at the railing, holding 3 cups of coffee. He handed them out without a word. Never thought I'd see this, Hendrix admitted, watching the women work. Never thought it could work. And now, Sarah asked. Now I think I was an idiot for assuming it couldn't. He sipped his coffee. You know, I've been assigned to mentor one of them, the tall one, Rodriguez. She's got potential, reminds me of someone. Sarah smiled. She reminds you of yourself, Chief. Stubborn, determined, unwilling to quit. Yeah, well, Hendrix actually grinned. I learned from the best. Below, an instructor's voice echoed across the grinder. Mitchell, get that log up. You don't get special treatment because you're a woman. You get the same hell as everyone else. The female candidate, no relation to Sarah, gritted her teeth and lifted the log higher. That's what we wanted, Webb observed. Equal standards, equal opportunity, equal respect. Sarah nodded, watching the future of naval special warfare unfold below. It wasn't perfect. There would be more challenges, more resistance, more women who would face what she'd faced. But the door was open now, and it would never close again. Her phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Bosworth. "Congratulations on your promotion to commander. Your next assignment awaits. Report to SOCOM headquarters next month. You're changing the military, one mission at a time." Sarah pocketed her phone and smiled. One mission accomplished, many more to come. On the grinder below, neither female candidate had rung the bell. They were still fighting, just like Sarah had taught them.